Today I am making a comforting meal, my kind of comfort food, starting off with lentil soup. Now this lentil soup is a JCD special because it starts off by making homemade Mexican style chorizo. So it's a little spicy, has some warm hints of cinnamon in it. I'm gonna serve it alongside a nice warm slice of anadama bread, which is a New England classic. To top it all off, a chocolate bundt cake made with Guinness. I know, Guinness is pretty interesting, but it goes so well with the chocolate, really bumps up the flavor. We're gonna get started with the anadama bread, and this is a classic bread recipe, has two rises. You make the dough, you let it rise, then you shape it into a loaf pan and you let it rise again before you bake it. So classic bread making technique. We're gonna start by mixing the wet ingredients. Here I have a cup of water, and this water is on the warm side, about 110 degrees. That just helps the yeast get going. If it's too much hotter, it might kill the yeast, and if it's too much colder, it'll still work, it'll just take longer. To this, we're gonna add the molasses, which is a classic flavoring of anadama. As I mentioned earlier, anadama is made with cornmeal and molasses, but this is something you find all over New England. And a lot of people think it's a riff on Boston brown bread because of the molasses and the cornmeal. But I love it because it's not very sweet, especially this recipe. So here I have a cup of water, quarter of a cup of mild molasses. To this, we're gonna add a little melted butter, 2.5 tablespoons of unsalted butter. I'm gonna whisk this together. Now for the dry ingredients, I'm gonna add them right to the bowl of the stand mixer. Here I have 2 3/4 of a cup of all-purpose flour. To that, we're gonna add a little cornmeal, 1/2 cup of good cornmeal. So you want 1.5 teaspoons of instant yeast and a little bit of table salt, 1.25 teaspoons. Now, just gonna make sure these are nice and combined. And using a mixer here really helps because this dough starts out a little bit on the wet side, so not having it all over your fingers is nice. All right, with the mixer on, nice and low, gonna add the liquid ingredients. Then it'll take a minute or two for this dough to come together. Then we'll increase the speed a little bit and let it knead about 6 to 8 minutes till it's nice and smooth. You can see that dough is starting to come together. Just a few dry bits left in the very bottom. Gonna let them get nice and absorbed. There we go. All right, cranking the speed. All right, this dough has been kneading for a good 7 minutes or so, and it is perfect. Oh, look at that. Now I am gonna knead it a little bit by hand just to make sure it's nice and smooth and bring it all together. Also, it's just fun to knead it by hand. It just feels so satisfying. Now, if the dough is a little sticky, definitely flour the counter, but this dough and this counter, which is great for kneading. Oh, I don't wanna, this is like the perfect consistency. What a lovely dough. All right, now I'm gonna round it into a nice round ball, and this is gonna be the first rise. Perfect. Into this greased bowl it goes. Gonna cover it with plastic wrap, let it rise. Ha! Must be the end of the roll. Is it enough to cover the bowl? Ooh, just nice. Okay. All right, we're just gonna let this sit on the counter, let it rise about an hour, hour and a half until it doubles in size. This dough is gorgeous. You can see it's ready to be shaped into a loaf, which means we have to get the loaf pan ready. Now, this recipe is kind of cool because it dusts the loaf pan with cornmeal. So what I'm gonna do is grease the pan with some vegetable oil spray, then just take a little cornmeal, I'm gonna shake it in there, and then we're just gonna shake it around. All right, I'm gonna shake out any excess. There we go. All right, time to shape the dough. Oh, so beautiful. So you just wanna stretch this dough out into a nice rectangle, about 17 inches long by about 8 inches wide. And we're gonna roll it up. You can see all that texture. It's beautiful, and it smells really good too. All right, so nice long rectangle. I'm gonna work away from me. You just wanna roll it up. This just gives the bread structure so that when it bakes, it puffs up. Tuck the ends, and we're gonna pinch this seam. Into the loaf pan it goes. Oh, you're pretty. All right, that looks beautiful. Cover it again with the last piece of plastic. Now we gotta let this loaf rise again about an hour, hour and a half. It's gonna bulge over the top of the loaf pan ever so slightly and be about doubled in size. This loaf has risen. Oh, it is gorgeous. You can see the striations in the loaf. That'll bake right in, which is cool. And it's risen above the edge of the loaf pan. It's ready for the oven. Now for the oven temperature, I heated up the oven at 425. Now that's not the baking temperature. That's just so we get a nice oven spring. So I'm gonna put this in the oven and turn the oven down to 375. That's the baking temperature. Bakes for about 40 minutes. Halfway through, I'll spin it around. Oh, this smells really good. You can see it is gorgeous and brown. It's risen above the rim of the, oh, hi, Ziggs. Zig's a big fan of freshly baked goods. Now, the good way to tell if a loaf of bread is done is to take its temperature. 200 to 210 is the average for bread. You know, there's lots of old tales about knocking on loaves and so forth. I find I just can't knock on a loaf and tell what it's telling me. So I like using an instant read thermometer. All right, we are gonna let this cool out of the pan. So there we go. Oh, you can see that nice cornmeal crust on the outside. All right, we're gonna let this cool completely and then we'll slice it and eat it with the soup. Speaking of soup, let's get started on that. Set that back there for now. And as I mentioned earlier, the soup starts with some homemade Mexican chorizo. You want about 3 tablespoons of vegetable oil. Now, it takes a lot of spices to make a good chorizo, starting with some paprika, 1 tablespoon of paprika, tablespoon of ground ancho chili, 1.5 teaspoons each of coriander and oregano. All right. Some salt, 3/4 of a teaspoon of table salt, 1/2 teaspoon of ground black pepper, 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon. And it's the cinnamon that really stands out in the soup. You can kind of taste it in the background and it just adds this lovely fragrance to the lentil soup. Just 1/4 teaspoon is enough, a pinch of allspice and a pinch of cayenne. There you go. All right, now the heat's been off. I'm gonna turn the heat to medium, and we're just gonna cook this medium heat a couple minutes till it's bubbling and fragrant. And we're just blooming these spices, letting those spice flavors come out into the oil, because a lot of these spices are oil soluble. That means the flavors release in oil. So it only takes a couple minutes. All right, you can see the mixture starting to bubble away, and I can really smell those spices coming alive. All right, now I'm gonna turn off the heat. I'm gonna add a little bit of vinegar. You want cider vinegar, about 3 tablespoons. There we go. A little bit of sugar, 1.5 teaspoons of sugar, and 1 clove of fresh garlic. I'm just gonna add it to the pot using a garlic press. And you notice we haven't even added the pork yet. We're gonna let this mixture cool down about 5 minutes, then we're gonna add the pork and start cooking. This mixture has cooled down and it smells so good. Now it's time to add the pork. This is 8 ounces of ground pork. And we're off heat at this point. We're just gonna mix the pork in, get it really nice and coated with all of those spices. All right, gonna turn it on medium-high heat here. Now we're just gonna cook this pork until it cooks through. It breaks down into nice fine crumbles. Some of the juices come out and start to bubble. And this just makes a great fresh chorizo that you could use in a lot of things, like an omelet. You could put it on a salad. You could make tacos. All right, we're gonna let this cook about 3 minutes or so. While it cooks, I'll keep my eye on it. Time to chop some vegetables for the soup to get us started. An onion and some carrots. 2 carrots, 1 large onion. For the carrots, you want to cut them into soup-sized pieces so that they fit on a spoon. So I'm just going to quarter them and cut them into chunks. to the chorizo already in the pot. We're gonna add the onion and carrots. We're gonna let these cook and soften for a few minutes. The smell of the chorizo to me means I'm about to have a good pot of soup. Couple minutes there. While those are cooking, let's talk about lentils, because lentils are the star of this show. Now I have a strong preference for these French lentils, lentils du Puy. This is about a cup of them because they hold together. They have a really nice earthy flavor. Brown lentils would also work well here, but they have a tendency to break down a bit more. And I find them to be a little bit starchier, which is why I like these du Puy. Now, we've always been taught you have to spread the lentils out and look for stones. I have never once in my career found a stone, but I stood next to someone once who did find a stone. So because of them, I always do it. I think it's easier if you spread it out on a rim baking sheet. Look for anything a little unusual. I'm not seeing anything, which is good. So now I'm gonna take these over to the sink and give them a quick rinse. See if I can get them back in the bowl. All right. All right, those are the lentils. See how our onions are doing. Time to add the spices. I'm gonna add a little bit of cumin and cinnamon, teaspoon of ground cumin, and half a teaspoon of cinnamon. Now I know we also have some spices like cinnamon in the chorizo, but I like adding a little to this soup because if you buy store-bought chorizo, which you can absolutely do with this soup, you wanna make sure there's enough cinnamon in the soup to carry through. I'm also gonna add some garlic, 3 cloves of garlic. Just gonna put it into the pot using the garlic press. There we go. Just wanna cook this until it's fragrant, about 30 seconds. You can see there's a nice fond forming on the bottom of the pan. That's good, that is good flavor. In go the tomatoes. These are canned tomatoes. This is a small can, a 14.5 ounce can of diced tomatoes. I'm draining them because I don't need the juice, I just want the solids. Just gonna cook those, get them incorporated again, about 30 seconds. And now I'm gonna add the lentils. A little bit of salt and pepper to taste. And this is the trick to this lentil soup. This helps the lentils stay together because we're not gonna add the liquid just yet. I'm gonna turn the heat down a little bit and let these lentils cook a little bit, about 8 to 10 minutes. Now, because of the acidity in the tomatoes, it's gonna help those lentils stay together in the finished soup. So 8 minutes, then we'll add the liquids. Love what you're watching? Take your cooking to the next level with our Essential membership. Get instant access to thousands of recipes, tips, techniques, product reviews, and step-by-step videos. Our Members app allows you to search by ingredient, set dietary preferences, and save your favorite recipes. For those looking to level up, our newest feature, ATK Classes, offers more in-depth instruction led by ATK experts, so you can gain greater confidence in the kitchen. Start your free trial by visiting the App Store or going to americastestkitchen.com/YouTube today. Oh, it's been a few minutes and this pot smells incredible. Starting to get some browning back on the bottom of the pot. That's perfect. Time to add the liquids. And we're gonna start off with half a cup of white wine. And actually, when it comes to cooking with white wine, I pretty much always use vermouth now, which is a wine with a lot of herbal flavors. It's shelf stable, so it kind of sits by the stove. And this is half a cup right into the pot. Turn up the heat a little bit. Want to simmer this out just for a minute or two. Bring the mixture to a simmer. And I like adding the wine to the pot before the water and the broth just to give it a chance to evaporate. Intensify its flavor, drive off some of that raw alcohol smell. All right, in goes the broth. 4 cups of chicken broth. 2 cups of water. Makes a nice big batch of soup. All right, we're gonna bring this to a simmer. I'm gonna cover it partially. Allow for a little evaporation, but try to trap some of the heat in there. Let those lentils simmer about a little over half an hour till they're nice and tender. These lentils have been simmering away. Oh, the aroma of this soup is like nothing else. And it's pretty unusual to have chorizo in a lentil soup, at least from my point of view. But man, it makes all the difference. All right, only one way to tell if the lentils are truly done, and that is to have a little taste. Ooh, they're perfect. You can see they've also really held together, which is why I love this lentil depuis. Now, what would a soup be in this house if you didn't finish it with yet more vegetables? And baby spinach is perfect because you don't really have to cook it. It just wilts right into the soup. That was a whole 5 ounces, which is where I shop, is a whole container. And we're gonna add some cilantro. This is 3 tablespoons of chopped fresh cilantro. That's it. It is ready to eat. Oh, what a nice big pot of soup. Perfect for sort of a doldrum spring day, which we have a lot of around here in the Northeast. And we have the cooled anadama bread. You can see the striations in the final loaf. I love that rustic look. Oh, there is nothing like the smell of fresh bread. And I have some nicely softened butter. My favorite little butter bell. This just means the butter can hang out at room temperature, but it has a little water in the bottom of that crock that prevents it from spoiling. So this is our salted butter for the table. Don't mind if I do. This will cure whatever is ailing you. I've also frozen this soup pretty successfully a handful of times. In fact, when I go visit my folks, I bring them some frozen containers of soup because I don't get to see them that often. They live a bit far away. And I like thinking that I'm cooking for them even though I'm not there. And this soup is one that freezes pretty well. Oh, right in for the broth. You get the chorizo, you get the spices of the ancho, and you have the cinnamon, the richness of the pork. And then the anadama bread, which I like to dip right in the soup. Helps melt that butter a little bit. You get the crunch of the cornmeal and the hint of the molasses with the hint of the spice of the soup is the perfect balance. And don't forget, we still have yet to make that chocolate bundt cake with a little Guinness poured into the batter. The flavor of the chocolate and the stout beer is just magical in a cake.
Love our in-depth reviews? Get the latest from our reviews team delivered straight to your inbox. Our well-equipped cook newsletter provides top product picks, no-nonsense buying guides, and must-try recipes. No extra fluff, just the smartest ways to shop, save, and cook. Sign up for free now at americastestkitchen.com/newsletter.
It's time to make the chocolate stout bundt cake. And of course, if you're gonna use stout, you might as well use Guinness. It's the king of stouts in my opinion. Now this is Guinness in a bottle. Usually I prefer it in a can because it has that little ball in the bottom that makes the nitrogen and makes it all creamy, but for baking, it really doesn't matter. Now you need 3/4 of a cup of Guinness, which I'm gonna measure out. Funny enough, if you're a bad pourer like I, that was a pretty lousy pour. You see all the foam on that? Don't include the foam in the amount of Guinness. If you wanna get rid of the foam, or try not to get as much foam, pour it down the side of the glass. I loved Guinness. I started loving Guinness in college. It just has this rich, weedy, hearty flavor, and you don't really taste it in the cake. It's more of a background note, but it is just delicious. 6 ounces of chopped bittersweet chocolate. I'm gonna combine that with the Guinness and some cocoa powder. This is 3/4 of a cup of cocoa powder. Now I'm using natural cocoa powder here, not the Dutch processed. So it has a slightly lighter color, but in this cake, we found it actually bakes the cake differently. The cake comes up with a taller cake and a little bit of a finer crumb if you use the natural cocoa. All right, into the microwave this goes to melt it all together. 50% power, about 3 minutes or so. I'm gonna stop and stir it occasionally. 3 minutes. Let's see. Oh, this looks pretty good. All right. Just gonna make sure it's nice and smooth. All that chocolate is melted. Because we're using the microwave, you're always gonna find a few hot spots in the bowl. So you really gotta stir it pretty well to make sure it's uniformly heated. Now it's a little too hot to stir the other ingredients into it right now, so I'm gonna set it aside just for the minute while we put together the dry ingredients. And this is 1 3/4 cups of flour. To this, we're gonna add a teaspoon of baking soda, teaspoon of table salt. That's it for the dry ingredients. All right, set this aside. You have 5 eggs. I'm gonna crack them ahead of time. Now you have to add them to the bowl one at a time, but even if you crack them into a single bowl, it's pretty easy to plop them into the mixer one at a time. All right, that's 5 eggs, and these are large eggs and they're room temperature, which is pretty important when you're making cake to have room temperature ingredients. That's how you get the most loft in your cake. Last but not least, the bundt pan. Now the key to a bundt cake, of course, is getting it out in one piece in the bundt style. And if you're using a chocolate cake, you really don't want to use that baking spray, you know, the stuff that comes in a can, because that's flour and it'll show up as white specks on the outside of your chocolate cake. So I'm going to show you how to prep a bundt pan for a chocolate cake. So here I have a tablespoon of the cocoa, same cocoa I used in the batter. And this is a tablespoon of melted unsalted butter. We're going to make our own cake release. So we're just going to mix this together. Makes a chocolatey paste. We're going to paint the inside of the bundt pan using a pastry brush. You can see it goes on just like paint, really. And this is just that non-stick coating, so the cake will come out without even a question. I'm working kind of fast, so I'm trying to do it before the chocolate butter mixture sets up. And also I'm using a pastry brush, not a basting brush. Basting brushes, you know, they have those big plastic bristles. They're great for barbecue sauce on the grill, but they're pretty lousy for this. You want the nice fine hairs of a pastry brush to really get into the corners here. All right, that's it. Pan's done, set this aside. Back to our melted mixture here. Just 2 more ingredients going into this melted chocolate and beer mixture. First up, a cup of sour cream. And of course some vanilla, a tablespoon of vanilla extract. Just whisk this all together. Vanilla, chocolate beer, you can smell it all. All right, now we can move over to our stand mixer and put the cake batter together. Starting the traditional way by creaming butter and sugar. This is 12 tablespoons of unsalted butter. We're gonna mix it with 2 cups of brown sugar. Again, that brown sugar, the vanilla, the stout, all has that deeper, richer flavor. We're gonna turn this on. It takes about 3 minutes for the butter and sugar to really cream and it gets light and fluffy before we add the rest of the ingredients. All right, that looks pretty good. You can see it's lighter in color, it looks fluffier, and it just looks like the consistency has changed, which means it's time to add the eggs. As I said earlier, I'm just gonna add them one at a time. Make sure that first one's somewhat incorporated before you add the second. You just wanna make sure you add them one at a time because you wanna slowly incorporate the liquid. Otherwise, it could get really lumpy and it'll be really hard to get those lumps out of the batter. All right, time to add the flour and the chocolate. I'm gonna add them in additions, going back and forth between the two. We're gonna start by turning it on low. Don't do high or else you're gonna have flour all over your kitchen. We're gonna do 3 batches of flour, 2 batches of chocolate. Starting with the flour. About 1/3 of the flour. Looks good, about half of the chocolate. All right, for this last bit of chocolate, I do make a mess. I find it better just to stop the mixer and get it all in there as best I can. There we go. Last addition of flour here. Now the mixer's never gonna mix all the flour in evenly, so we're gonna do the last bit by hand. That looks pretty good. All righty. Stirring the rest of this flour in. All right, batter looks perfect. Into the prepared bundt pan it goes. Now this is a 12-cup bundt pan, and I did try to make it once in a 10-cup bundt pan because I love the different shapes that bundt pans come in. Did not work so well. It really went over the lip of the pan. So you pretty much want to stick with a 12-cupper. Gonna give it a few wraps on the counter. get any big air bubbles to come up to the surface. Now into the oven it goes, 350 degrees, about 50 minutes until a skewer comes out clean. Of course, I'll spin it around halfway through. This cake has been cooling in the pan for 10 minutes. It's not cool, but it's cool enough to handle and flip out onto a wire rack because you want to let it cool completely outside of the pan. There we go. Ooh. All right, I heard it fall out of the pan. Oh, perfection. Perfection on all sides? Oh yeah. This is the hallmark of a great bundt cake. You can hold its ridges. Now it's important not to let the bundt cake cool completely in the pan. I've done this, and it's really hard to get it out in one piece. Sort of the top layer sticks. So cooling it for just 10 minutes means the cake is sturdy enough to turn it out. Then we're gonna let it cool completely on this wire rack. It takes a couple hours. The cake is cooled, and I'm ready to taste it. Oh, knife goes through like a dream. Just a petite slice for me. Look at that gorgeous fine crumb. Now, this recipe does come with a glaze that's also made with Guinness and chocolate, but I gotta say, I like it with just a little unsweetened whipped cream and a few raspberries because it's not a super sweet cake and it has a nice fine crumb. There we go. That with a little cup of coffee. Oh yeah. I mean, this will make you smile. It's not a super chocolatey cake. It's got that chocolate cocoa flavor that I love. Not too sweet, a super fine, delicate crumb. It is perfect. See you next time. If you're ready to take your cooking to the next level, head over to americastestkitchen.com and get a free trial of our ATK Essential membership. While you're there, you can sign up for our free email newsletters and download our app. So, what are you waiting for?